Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, chaotic scenes in South Africa's parliament. President Jacob Zuma's State of the Union address got off to a late start and was disputed repeatedly by opposition figures, while protesters outside take to the streets. Also, the crimes against humanity trial of former Chadian dictator Hissene Habre wraps up. He's faced judges in Senegal over accusations over the deaths of and abuse of hundreds of thousands of people during his oppressive 8-year rule. And almost 200 Nigerian Shiites face firearms charges in Nigeria. They plead not guilty and say that clashes with troops that landed them in court were part of a campaign of persecution by authorities. First, as expected, opposition lawmakers gave South Africa's president a hard time on Thursday as he gave his State of the Nation address. Members heckled Jacob Zuma before some walked out of the chamber. Elsewhere, police fired stun grenades at protesting crowds. Now, last year was marked by growing concerns about inequality, the persistence of racism, and a rise in xenophobic attacks.
Still, I'm here for 6 years, and I'm happy with the situation. But I always say no to xenophobia. Stop racism, stop xenophobia attack, and treat us as a human being, not a foreigners.
I just wanted to have a clean government, and I want a government that would like to respond to the needs of the people. For instance, unemployment, free education for these poor people, and attend to issues that the people have been complaining about.
Well, Zuma himself is under fire over a number of issues, including his economic record and ongoing calls for him to pay back some of the millions in public cash used to upgrade his private residence. Aisha Ishmael joins us now from Cape Town. Aisha, it seems that in some ways Zuma's State of the Nation address was marked by a rather chaotic State of the Nation outside and inside of the chamber, but all this can't really have come as a surprise, could it?
Certainly not a surprise. Opposition parties warned ahead of President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address that they would want him to answer questions. And these questions pertain to why he fired a very competent finance minister, Nhlanhla Nene, which saw the South African rand fall to an all-time low last year. They also wanted him to tell them when he was going to resign and also when he was going to pay back the money, the millions of rand spent on his private Nkandla residence, which the public protector found some of these renovations were not security related and that they were unlawful and unnecessary. But before they could get those questions answered, some opposition parties were ejected from Parliament, and so and outside of Parliament as people become increasingly disillusioned and disenchanted with President Jacob Zuma.
Well, despite the chaos that Zuma faced, he did try to address some big plans to tackle, for example, the energy deficit. What key points on that front did he manage to get out?
Well, he did talk about nuclear energy, which has been hotly debated in South Africa, and those opposed to nuclear energy saying it is just too costly. South Africa can ill afford to have nuclear energy rolled out in South Africa. President Jacob Zuma said that it would be rolled out, but at a pace that the country can afford. He also placed a lot of emphasis and focus on investment and the economy. He talked about growing the economy, making South Africa more attractive to foreign investors, but he did say that South Africa was in good hands and that South Africa's democracy was stable.
Well, he would, wouldn't he? Thanks very much. Aisha Ishmael there for us in Cape Town. Well, in other news, the landmark crimes against humanity trial of former Chadian dictator Hissene Habre wound up in Senegal on Thursday. He's accused of overseeing the deaths of over 40,000 people before his oppressive 8-year rule came to an end in 1990. Now, it's the first time an African former head of state has been tried by another court on the continent. The 73-year-old could face a life sentence if convicted. Our Colin Baker followed that final day in court for us.
It's the final day of the trial here against Hissene Habre, the former president of Chad, in the Extraordinary African Chambers of Dakar. Today, for a packed house, lawyers appointed to the defense made their final pleas to the judges, saying that this case has been built on little evidence, but on enormous international pressure from human rights groups, such as Amnesty International. That said, victims yesterday left the courthouse feeling a certain sense of victory, that closure had been brought in some part after 4 months of harrowing testimonies. A lawyer for the victims said that he'd seen a certain legitimacy in this new structure of justice, saying that the defense attorneys had done their work and had presented a strong case. Now we wait until May for the final verdict.
Colin Baker there for us in Dakar. Central African Republic's gearing up for the second round of presidential elections this weekend. The polls are key to stepping on that long road to stability after years of violent unrest and political chaos. The landscape is still volatile and armed groups remain powerful in key towns. Our reporters, Catherine Norris-Trent, headed to one central community with one of the two men in Sunday's presidential runoff.
On the campaign trail, presidential candidate Anissé Georges Dologeli has come to Bambari, a flashpoint for violence, a town still divided on either side of this bridge between Christian and Muslim communities, and still guarded by the UN. At the town hall, the candidate is meeting rebel warlords still at large in the town.
We're having discussions with the head of armed groups so we can move towards restoring peace, security and disarmament.
In Bambari, armed ex-Seleka rebels still control most roads into town and man a base right in the centre. The state's disarmament programme is still clearly in initial stages.
They are not going to lay down their weapons overnight. We haven't discussed details. As long as national forces haven't secured the town, any force capable of ensuring the safety of the people is welcome.
Ex-Seleka rebel leader General Ali Daras tells us he is prepared to cooperate with national authorities, but only up to a point.
We are military men, and we will hold discussions with the government, but we have conditions to be met before we're prepared to disarm. If they're not met, we won't lay down our weapons.
Security, or the lack of it, and the gaping lack of state structures has been highlighted again in this presidential campaign. Whoever wins this election will have to make a priority of simply regaining control of the territory.
Catherine Norris-Trent there for us in Central African Republic. This week, Nigerian prosecutors charged nearly 200 members of a pro-Iranian Shiite group with illegal possession of firearms following clashes with troops in 2015. The Islamic Movement of Nigeria claims it's being persecuted by authorities, and rights groups believe that hundreds of its members were killed by the army in Zaria town last December.
These piles of rubble used to be the compound of Nigeria's most prominent Shiite Muslim leader, Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki. He's in custody. The authorities levelled the compound after 3 days of clashes in December between the army and Shiites in this northern city of Zaria. Human Rights Watch said at least 300 Shiites were killed. The army says the clashes erupted after Shiites blocked the convoy of its chief of staff.
We have problems with those violent extremists amongst them, who should be brought to justice and who should be caged.
But the Shiites say the clashes were due to an unjustified attack by the army. They were the worst in decades for this minority group.
It's not just the leaders who are angry. Everyone you'll talk to in the community is very angry.
The vast majority of Nigeria's Muslims are Sunni. Some of them in Zaria accuse Shiites of carrying out attacks.
They destroyed 2 of our motorcycles right here by this gate. When I tried to talk to them, they hit me with a machete, injuring me on the head.
Activists who defend the Shiites say the investigation into the clashes launched by the authorities cannot be impartial.
The probe that has been set up now was set up by government. You should have involved independent organizations like the Nigerian Bar Association, the Nigerian Union of Journalists. The military is part of government. I do not think that it is proper to ask government to investigate its own arm.
Some analysts and diplomats say they are very worried that such violence could lead to the formation of a radical Shiite militant wing, similar to the Sunni Boko Haram uprising in 2009.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Do stay with us for a short break and more news from around the world coming up.